Hey, welcome back, everyone. In studio, if you're smart enough to have gotten Fox Nation, you're seeing Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. Man, you are one busy guy. How much are you reading every day through all these investigations that you're doing?
No busier than a guy who's doing TV shows and radio and everything else.
But I can ask smart guys questions. You have to come up with the questions to try to get answers to change our country's direction.
We are reading a lot, but I don't pretend my job's any harder than any other American trying to make it in Joe Biden's economy. So, but we are working hard. We got a good team at the Judiciary Committee, and we got to deal with this border situation, and then we got to deal with what we really believe is the federal agencies now being turned and targeting the very people they're supposed to represent. And so those are our sort of two primary areas of focus.
Well, when you talk about the border, it's very hard to get this administration's attention at the border. So what in the House is possible?
Well, we're going to pass legislation out of the committee. In fact, we'll do that in the next several weeks that we think would remedy and fix the problem. But again, I don't think this administration is interested in putting that into law because they've intentionally created the chaos we have seen now for 2 years. We were just down there last week in Yuma, Arizona. I always say I think it's three questions. How did it happen? How did we get here? Why does it matter? How do you fix it? And we know how we got here. Day one. I mean, literally day one, Joe Biden says we're no longer going to build the wall. We're not going to have remain in Mexico policy, and we're not going to deport anyone who comes in on an immigration violation. And so when you announce to the world, and everyone wants to come to the best country ever, when you announce to the world that you won't have to wait in Mexico, there's no wall to get over, and we're not going to deport you, well, shazam, everyone's coming. And so what we tried to really show last week at the hearing was why it matters. And I think the one testimony I'll highlight was the testimony from the hospital administrator who said the cost, $26 million in uncompensated care, and that they've had to provide in the Yuma hospital. And they're going to help people, of course, migrants or whomever. They're going to help them. But he said we have all kinds of citizens who couldn't deliver their children in the maternity ward because they were helping migrant families. And so there are real costs to education system, to law enforcement, to property, to the growers out there who grow the most of the vegetables we consume in the wintertime. The leafy
the hospital was the big one.
Yeah.
Where you're watching a hospital is going to go out of business because no one's getting paid, and they don't necessarily want to check. They want this thing solved.
Yes.
So Congressman, your job is you're in politics. So why would Arizona possibly have two Democratic senators? How did Kelly get 6 more years when he showed an ambivalence up until the last few months of what's going on? What is going on in Arizona? Why do we care on the outside more than people do on the inside?
Yeah, now we got some good members of Congress from that great state, but you're right. I was surprised. I was surprised by the election results there with their governor's race as well.
Huge, the governor's race.
Pardon?
It's huge.
Yeah, no, exactly. I thought Kari Lake was such a great candidate, and unfortunately she didn't win. But I do think we have to get better at some of the nuts and bolts. And this states with big mail-in voting, like Arizona has, we're going to have to make sure we're banking those votes early. Just nuts and bolts, practical politics that our party is going to have to engage in if we're going to compete and be able to win in some of these states.
Many things that Attorney General Garland really struck me as absolutely insane this week. But one thing he said is, we know where fentanyl comes from. It comes from the cartels. No, it doesn't. It starts in China, then goes to the cartels. Why do they have such a hard time saying the problem is China, we need to pressure them there to pressure the cartels? And people try to mock, I think it was Maggie Haberman's book, said that Trump one time brought up, maybe we should bomb these cartels. Now, okay, we just can't bomb another country, but the sentiment I agree with, and there is things we can do to get Mexico to do that.
Yeah, and declare them as a terrorist organization,
What would that do?
And then sanctions and everything else can kick in. And there's things you can do. I mean, financially, that you can do. But yeah, that
the way we unwind terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, treat them like because they're in fact are. There was in the central part of Mexico about 6-8 weeks ago, big story that where the cartels were basically in a gunfight. Like this kind of stuff you see in the movies, a gunfight with the government. That's how much power and influence and money and unfortunately arms that these cartels have. And they're moving people, moving drugs, and they're making a ton of money on all of it. And this administration's policies are making it so they can make a ton of money moving people and moving drugs.
Now, if you put your headsets on like traditional guests do, you would hear the music begin.
Okay.
And then it gets louder, and eventually you get cut off. When we come back, the real segment we're going to do. This was a bonus segment, which I'm willing to legally satisfy you with. You listen to the Brian Kilmeade Show. Congressman Jim Jordan's here en route to doing everything important in New York City. Don't move. Brian Kilmeade Show.
So, as you note, Brett, the FBI has for quite some time now assessed that the origins of the pandemic are most likely a potential lab incident in Wuhan. me step back for a second. You know, the FBI has folks, agents, professionals, analysts, virologists, microbiologists, et cetera, who focus specifically on the dangers of biological threats. So here you're talking about a potential leak from a Chinese government-controlled lab that killed millions of Americans, and that's precisely what that capability was designed for.
So that was Christopher Wray, who wasn't direct on a lot of questions with Brett Baer, but he answered that one specifically. Congressman Jim Jordan still in studio, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. So he agrees with the Department of Energy, who I didn't know had a team of scientists. But the president won't commit. The CIA has no opinion. Congressman, what do you think the point was of the FBI saying that, Chris Wray saying what he said?
Well, maybe I think they're being square with this and frankly confirming what we all suspected for now several years. I mean, you know, I always joke and say that they wanted us to believe it was a bat to a pangolin to a hippopotamus to Joe Rogan, and then, you know, we get the coronavirus everywhere. It's like, come on, we all kind of think it came from a lab. But I appreciate that. I appreciate what the Department of Energy said, basically confirming what we all suspected. But that's not the first thing. I mean, you think about the virus. Everything they told us was false, right? They told us that they said it wasn't gain-of-function research. Sure looks like it was. They told us that it wasn't our tax money at the Wuhan. Yes, it was. It said it didn't come from a lab. Now it sure looks like it did. And we have two agencies that said it. They have evidence that it did. They said the vaccinated couldn't get it. The vaccinated couldn't transmit it. And they said for the first time in the history of humankind, there is no such thing as natural immunity. Well, what? So, you know, like so many times, the government will, when you push back on what the government's telling you, you end up being the ones right, and they end up being the ones who were pushing some baloney.
And that's part of the exposure with the Twitter files.
Yep.
About what was going on then. And if you follow Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger and Barry Weiss, which I've been doing, but other networks haven't, that's what you're doing this week.
Yep.
And for example, when it comes to COVID, what was the FBI doing there? Suggesting to Twitter to the point where their heads were like spinning. Take this person down, or this is dangerous. You do what you want.
Yeah, well, people like Dr. Bhattacharya, who happens to have an MD and is a doctor and professor of medicine at Stanford. I was joking with one crowd. I said, you know, Stanford, it's not the Big Ten, but it's pretty good. Like, what the heck? You're going to take him down because some bureaucrat in the federal government smarter than Dr. Bhattacharya and Marty McCarthy, a whole bunch of other learned people, and they were just saying things. One tweet got taken down that was basically restating what the CDC had on their own website. But oh no, we got to take that down. I mean, this is how ridiculous this attack on First Amendment free speech is.
So Matt Taibbi said that what he saw with the FBI interaction with Twitter, they got $3.4 million of taxpayer money to work with the FBI, and he says they believe the Twitter was underpaid.
Yeah.
As much as they were asked to do. Yet Christopher Wray can honestly say, we don't tell anyone what to post and what not to post. Can you connect those dots?
I actually think that they were pressuring Twitter and priming Twitter for all kinds of things. There's a few tweets, or emails from Elvis Chan, FBI agent, special agent in San Francisco, who met with these social media platforms all the time, weekly basis in the run-up to the 2020 and 2022 elections. And there's one email where he says, Twitter folks, which shows you how cordial and chummy they were. Twitter folks is the heading. We think the following accounts and tweets violate your terms of service. So the government's telling Twitter what violates Twitter's terms of service, and Twitter's got all these. There was one where there's like 20-some accounts. I think all of them got, the tweets got what they call visibility filtered, which is like shadow banned or limited. In some cases, just deleted. Are taken off. All of the 20, all except Billy Baldwin was the one that, you know, if you go through the Twitter files, he was fine. Just happened to be interestingly enough, the guy who wasn't filtered.
One of your great attributes is you can distill down into a conversational way what is happening. You also have this great recall of reconstructing how we got to this event. You don't ever assume that people know what we're building, which sometimes it's hard at Fox because we're building a storyline every day, all truth. We got to remember that sometimes people just put on the television 1 minute. So Matt Taibbi discovered Hamilton 68.
Yeah, scary.
So here's how he described it, what he found and what his focus was. Not this Twitter drop, the previous Twitter drop.
So in the early Trump years, there was an organization called Hamilton 68 that was the source of probably hundreds of news stories over the course of a period of years that was allegedly tracking Russian bots Their secret sauce was a list of 600 accounts they said were linked to Russian influence. Well, in the Twitter files, we found the list. And the list, let's just say, is mostly bereft of Russians, but is full of real Americans. And what they basically did is a fraud. They took ordinary conversations of ordinary conservatives mostly, and essentially just called it Russian influenced.
Exactly right. Wouldn't share that list. Twitter had to go kind of re-engineer it to figure that list out. Wouldn't share that list. But when they would put that out, as these guys who former guys in government and respected individuals, when they would put that out, then that would get to the media, and then the media would go pressure the tech platforms. Why aren't you responding to what Hamilton 68, what they're saying, and this list that they put together? And again, no one saw the list, but when finally Twitter went back through and like reconstructed it, I think is the word that Taibbi used, they saw this was all baloney. It
would run rampant. So these stories that were generated tangentially by the FBI on Twitter would be a source for CNN and MSNBC and the Washington Post and New York Times and Mother Jones.
And just as importantly, Democrat leaders in the Congress would then see the story and then be calling and pressuring the social media platforms, and that's how they kept earning and turning and churning this whole process. All again, the outcome being conservatives were being their speech was being attacked and limited on these platforms.
What about Adam Schiff requesting this be taken down? What about Angus King? Somebody that he was running against, he was requesting these certain things come down. They felt perfectly calm going, when you have some time, call Twitter, take down this account. It's not making me happy. Yeah. It's insane. And what a great thing Elon Musk did. There's probably one person in the world that could have done what he did, let alone had the motivation that he had.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. And when I got a chance to talk to him, I said, thank you for what you're doing for the First Amendment. I actually think this is maybe the biggest threat we face, because we can, in the end, we're going to be able to deal with all the other stupid things Biden's doing on energy and inflation and all the tax bad policy and regulatory. We're going to be able to deal with that. But if the left is successful in destroying the First Amendment and our right to speak, what you do every single day, if the government can tell you what you can say and what you can't say, if the government can set up a disinformation governance board as if some agency is going to tell you what's appropriate speech and what's not appropriate speech, that is frightening in America. So this is where we're really going to focus, because we're the Judiciary Committee. We're supposed to be the committee protecting the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and your First Amendment liberties, for goodness sake. So we're going to spend a lot of time in this area.
So we're talking obviously with Jim Jordan. Is that within your repertoire? The House Judiciary Committee chairperson doing the weaponizing of government. Yeah. That's a separate thing?
Yeah, it's a subcommittee, select subcommittee within the Judiciary Committee.
Have you ever thought about this? Because you don't do foreign policy necessarily. But as evil as Vladimir Putin is, in the beginning when they wanted to say that he was influencing the election and Donald Trump was his candidate and they won, they were celebrating. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
But after a while, when they start coming up with storylines that didn't happen, and accusing them of doing things that didn't take place and relationships that they had nothing to do with. At one point, they had to be saying, what is going on over there? Yeah. We found out, I read every page of the Mueller report, we found out all these links that jumped around because Manafort was working in Russia and in Eastern Europe, and they said that those were links to Trump. Stuff that didn't exist.
Yeah, never found anything.
How would poison relations between two countries that have been at loggerheads for 70, 80 years and had ceased fire for about 10.
Yeah.
Think about the damage that was done to those relations because of fictional linkages with President Trump.
Yet, in spite of all that, Putin didn't go into Ukraine while President Trump was president. Because, I mean, that to be, I think you're making a great point. But again, it just demonstrates, I think, this other point, which is President Trump displayed strength and from the Oval Office and projected strength from the Oval Office. Frankly, what we have now in the current president is just the opposite. I always point this out too. Mike Pompeo was asked a question. He might have been on your show. Mike was asked a question about a year ago, right after Putin first went into Ukraine. And they asked him, they said, Mr. Secretary, would this have happened in a Trump administration? He gave a great answer. He gave the right answer. He said, the short answer is I don't know, but I do know this. It didn't happen in a Trump administration. And that says it all. So, yeah, in spite of all the stuff the left was creating, that was false, that was complete baloney, $30 million and 19 lawyers and 30-some FBI agents and everything else that the Mueller report did, the Mueller investigation did, they found nothing. But in spite of all that, we still had a president who projected strength, and the things that we see happen in this administration didn't happen when he was president.
Do you believe that Facebook, if we would go do the forensics on them like it's happening with Twitter now, would reveal similar linkages greater even than Twitter?
We're trying to find out. We've sent them we sent them a letter saying, give us the same information. Or, say it in different words, give us all the communications you had with the FBI, what was going on in the run-up to these elections, what kind of pressure you went. So we've done this. We've asked them for the same information that Twitter has given us because Elon Musk bought the company.
Right. And then we know Mark Zuckerberg said it, and I'm not convinced he didn't do it on purpose. On Joe Rogan, when he came out, the FBI called and says, look out for this, and sure enough, it happened. Then we find out in August they did a tabletop on what if the Russians do try to infiltrate the election, and they knew they have the whole Hunter laptop.
You have read it all. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have the whole Hunter Biden laptop scenario out there. So the Washington Post and New York Times and Twitter, they're all there. So when it does happen, you don't even need that direct call. They already have a game plan.
Of course, like Joel Roth in his sworn declaration says that for repeatedly throughout—
Who used to run Twitter.
Yeah, trusted David. He says repeatedly throughout 2020, I got briefings from OD. I had briefings of ODNI, FBI, and DHS, and they happen weekly. They talked about a hack and leak operation. They told us it was going to happen likely in October of 2020, and it was likely going to involve Hunter Biden. Now think about that. And then, of course, along it comes. So the FBI for a year tells Twitter and these social media platforms there's going to be a hack and dump. It's going to be in October, and it's going to involve Hunter Biden. These guys are clairvoyant. How did they know? How did they know? Because they had the stinking laptop
for 8 months.
Yeah, they had it since December of 2019. And so that, as you point out, when the New York Post story happens on October 14th, well, Shazam, there it is. Well, son of a gun. Well, that's what. And then, of course, that's followed up 5 days later by the now famous letter from the 51 former Intel guys. All these brilliant guys who still have security clearance: Clapper, Brennan, Morell, all these people. And the letter says that the Hunter Biden laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation.
It's interesting words, right? Because it didn't say has the earmarks of.
Yeah, and Clapper's trying to change his story now, right?
Right. So that's what they're trying to do. Say, I never said it. I'm just saying I was asked. It looks like Russia? And they say so if you drill down and say, what does Russia disinformation look like? They say it's mixed between true and false. They'll put some true stuff in there, and then the stuff surrounding it will be false.
Yeah.
So, by the way, that is everything. Welcome to life. You want to trust that person. You don't know if everything is true. But why would you, I understand why Clapper would sign it and Brennan. They showed their colors. But I was surprised by Mike Morell, who used to brief Bush. And I was surprised Michael Hayden, I know, had a stroke. He used to be a level-headed guy, but Trump made him crazy. And then number two, the biggest one is Panetta, the former Republican, former chief of staff for Clinton. And I know he leans left. Obviously, he worked for Obama. Got it. But he was very critical of President Obama's foreign policy, especially when he left. And he could be supportive of certain things at certain times. Why would you sacrifice your reputation? And who started this letter? Do you know who the first one to write?
We're working on that, and we're gonna talk with some of these folks. We've actually sent letters to these individuals, a large portion of the 51, and we are looking to see if they'll come in for a transcribed interview. So we're in the process of making that happen, and we've actually got some documents. I can't talk about them yet, but we've got some documents from some of the people who have signed on to that letter.
Because they're concerned about their own reputation?
When we contacted them, some of them have already given us documents.
I'm going to just project for a second. When Joe Biden stood on that stage, he knew it was his son's laptop. And when he was challenged by President Trump, he said 51 intelligence experts said that this is information.
Cited the letter, yeah.
And I always say that when you catch somebody lying, how did they sound? How did they look? Because you got to know what they're going to. When they sound like that again, you know they're lying again.
Yeah.
He was that comfortable saying that was not. He always said that's not my son's laptop. I talked to him. All somebody had to do is call up Devin Archer. Say, Devin, did you send that email? This is the FBI. Devin, did you send that email to Hunter? Next, did you send? They were all gettable. It's the FBI. And then you go, well, I talked to 50 people on those emails. They all verified it was them.
Yeah.
But we didn't even do those basic 1930s techniques of investigation.
Well, in some ways, you didn't even have to do that much because you had the eyewitness. You had Bob Alinsky who had come forward and said it was that this stuff was going on. So you had the actual laptop in the possession of the FBI. You had the eyewitness who was willing to talk about it. Who was a business partner who did talk to the FBI and did talk publicly on your network. So you had all that, and yet they prepped him, they primed him, they set him up for what they anticipated was going to happen. And I'm amazed because, okay, every 4 years there's an October surprise. So maybe they get the time right. But they got the method and the person, right? They got the time, the method, and the person. And they'd been telling, according to Yoel Roth's sworn declaration, they'd been telling him this for a year. Right. You got to be kidding me.
Right. And your challenge will be making it simple that the average person with 2 jobs and 4 kids can understand it. And that's not easy. So
think about it, though. They prepped the social media with what we just described. And then, of course, they've developed this long relationship where they're sending emails. Hey, Twitter folks, where they're communicating on the super secret teleporter James Bond app that the messages disappear after a certain length of time. They're giving them security clearances, and they're paying them $3.4 million. Right. And so when it all happens in October, just couple weeks before the most important election we have, well, for goodness sake, it's got to be a hack and dump operation.
Jim Jordan, I can't afford you for another segment, so I'm going to have to let you go. He has a huge fee. I'm only kidding. We're up against the break. It's always educational to talk to you.
You bet.
Thanks for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Jim Jordan of Ohio. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.